Hey, everybody, this is Stephen Jeffries from Fright Night, and you're listening to Without Your Head.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by a musician who's played and toured with multiple musical icons, and he still believes, the Sax Man, Timmy Cappello. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Neil. It's nice because since you got in touch with me, I've been sort of asking around about your podcast and have heard nothing but rave reviews. So I'll have to after I listen to what we do, I'm going to go back in the archives and because everybody says it's really fun.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. That's good to hear. And I'm glad you're doing
that
it.
was
And I'm glad
nice.
people Yeah. I've only had one guest that 13 years hang up on me, so I think that's a good record.
Oh, that's a story I'd like to hear. I guess you can cut it out if it goes too far astray. But maybe when the interview's over, you can tell me how that went.
I will indeed. So well, first of all, I asked you this off air is because you're usually Tim, and the email stuff it's Timmy. So which do you prefer?
Well, I'm much more used to Timmy because when I was growing up, that's what my family and friends and everybody always called me. My wife calls me Timmy. Everybody I know calls me Timmy. And it's just one of those things. It seems like a strange name for, the image that I had in the Lost Boys and with Tina. I've actually seen people go, this guy's name is Timmy? It doesn't make any sense. It's like, Timmy and Lassie, or sounds like a kid's name. Mm-hmm. But you just get used to it because people call you that, and that's just what you're used to. But what happened was that on Lost Boys, they, as everybody knows, they put, which was really generous of them, to actually make everybody's name put everybody's name on the front of the cover, which was awesome, except for the first pressing, they spelled my name wrong with one P, and they just called me Tim without asking or without anything. I guess just figuring, some, bodybuilder dude doesn't want to be called Timmy. They just made that assumption. And so that's the way it went. And because that's the thing I'm most known for, everybody calls me Tim, but it sometimes I don't turn around. So it feels, for me, it feels sort of like it should be, Sergeant Tim Cappello. It doesn't feel like me, but that's okay.
Yeah. No, I wanted to read this to you because I found it funny. It was on your Wikipedia page. This is what it says about you, and I want your take on it. It says he is notable for his muscular physique, his sexually provocative movements during his performances, and for his tendency to perform shirtless, with his skin oiled and with his hair in a ponytail. That's what you read on your Wikipedia, which I think that's a hell of a description.
Well, I have no idea. I've had a Wikipedia page for since I've checked. Mm-hmm. I checked to see if there was one. I don't know who does it. I don't know. I guess you probably know more about that stuff than I do. I've never put one up. So I guess people do it and people change it. And then I've heard some really weird stuff, and then it'll disappear. Like somebody said, I don't know, I went to Tibet and studied Buddhism, and then that's what made me get into the saxophone or something. Like really crazy stuff that obviously people were just doing for fun, right? Wikipedia, anybody can edit that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's which is very strange because I think then some people will put up stuff that that just flies under the radar because it seems like, well, that must be a true story, and then it's up there forever, and and it's something that could never have happened.
I just kind of think as I agree with you. I think that's a good description. Like if somebody didn't know my name, but they read that, oh, I know that nut from the Lost Boys, yeah. Or I've seen those Tina concerts, yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right. I think it's an accurate description. And like I said, I just let that page have a life of its own. If they want to say crazy stuff about me, that's wrong. I don't really have the technical know-how to go and change it or whatever. So it changes every once in a while, and sometimes there's just real lies in it that you could tell people are just having fun. They're just saying something silly. And so I kind of don't mind that either, if they
as long as it's entertaining. As long as it's entertaining, right?
Say that again.
I said, as long as it's entertaining, I think that's a good guideline.
Yeah, I mean, like I had kind of chuckled when somebody said I went to Tibet and studied Buddhism, and that's what made me pick up the saxophone. It's obviously was never true, and I don't think the people intended for anybody to believe it, but they just have fun with it. And I feel really kind of, I don't know, not honored. Honor's not the right word, but that people understand the humor that's in what I do. I'm so like, when I was young, now that I'm people that are kind of into the Lost Boys or come to these conventions and I talk to, now that I'm their grandfather's age, it really is much different than it used to be. I used to get a lot of hostility. Oh, if you're big, they think you're tough. Well, I've never been in a fight in my entire life. I've never hit anybody. I've never been hit. It's just I'm just sort of a hippie, but people get the impression, that and Timmy used to say that to me a lot too. Oh no, don't wear your hair down because that's too soft. You remember, you got to be the tough guy. And it's hard. I don't even know what she's talking about.
Yeah. So actually, when you mentioned there about they have the story up about why you pick up the saxophone, what is the real reason why? Because I understand that you play a lot of different instruments and you grew up with a father in music, but what was it about the sax that specifically got you into it?
I was I was one of those weird kids that just, to this day, I'm not familiar with, the Led Zeppelin records. And I have really big holes in my musical knowledge of when I was growing up and what I would have been, what everybody else was into. I just, for some weird reason, I was just totally attracted to jazz. And as a kid, I was really attracted to sort of real modern progressive jazz, like Ornette Coleman and stuff like that. And so all of my heroes, all the guys that I thought were so cool, Joe Henderson, Charlie Parker, Lester Young, I just thought those were the coolest guys in the world. And I just thought that the saxophone is kind of like talking and singing without words.
Mm-hmm.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It really, everybody has their own voice. Like somehow the shape of your like throat and your trachea and your mouth and your palate. Like no two people sound alike on the instrument. Whereas sometimes, you know, like piano players and drummers and stuff, they really have to work hard to develop like riffs and develop their own lexicon, because of course, basically everybody sounds the same. Piano, you know, the notes sound the same. So somebody like Thelonious Monk worked on all those little clusters of notes and made himself very original on the instrument. But it ain't that easy, I don't think. But, you know, Sonny Rollins sounds so different than John Coltrane or Joe Henderson or Wayne Shorter. Like those four people sound so different. And I don't think it has much to do with much else than the shape of their, from their lungs to their lips. And that's the way it is with a voice too, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You and I could talk. I would instantly know who you are just from the sound of your voice, and it's the shape of that part of your body. Who knows? Maybe it's even the shape of your whole body.
It's interesting.
And so I always liked that, and I just loved jazz. The only rock guy that I was really enamored with and was in love with was Captain Beefheart. That was my only rock, you know, sort of idol. I just liked those very progressive sounds. And I definitely backed off from that since I was a kid. I guess, you know, kids, teenagers are rebellious and want to get into the weirdest stuff that they can, or at least I was like that. I don't know. When you were, do you find that your taste in music has changed or expanded? Like, it doesn't really matter what style, just so long as you feel like there's something good in it?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I even feel the same way about movies, because some people really get caught up in the genre, like, is this sci-fi or whatever? But I think if the movie, if you like it, if you feel something about it, some type of emotional connection, it doesn't really matter, you know, what genre it is.
And so sometimes you find yourself loving a movie that's outside of what people would. I mean, you know, you've kind of, to a certain extent, right? There's a percentage of your life that you've really devoted to horror.
Yes.
And so, you know, people would get that impression. I mean, can you actually love like a romantic comedy?
Oh, sure, but that's probably not a genre I really lean towards. But like, yeah, if it's something I like. I mean, I like a lot of I really like a lot of like mafia movies. I love Goodfellas and Godfather and those kind of movies. And
oh, sure.
And I love Taxi Driver. I don't even know where you'd put that into, but yeah, if it's just something that I like, I like it. It doesn't really matter, you know, what the genre is. I don't say, you know, I'm not someone who just watches nothing but horror movies and, you know, has to be all kinds of, you know, craziness. If I like it.
Yeah, and I bet when you were younger, it kind of wasn't like that, right? You were really devoted to the genre, maybe more than you are now. Is that true? Is that true for most people, you think?
I think so.
A little bit?
I think so. Yeah, as you get older, you think you look at things differently, and you're not so worried about like you're kind of saying when you're younger, you want to rebel and stuff, and maybe you're a little more concerned about what other people might think of you, even though liking horror movies does make you And then later on, it's like I don't really care if people if I like professional wrestling, and that's very, you know, not everyone's a wrestling fan, but I like it, so I don't. It doesn't really concern me, you know, what other people think.
Sure, of course. Well, you know, you're seeing you're seeing the irony in it, and you're seeing all the levels at which you can take it, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, I mean, do you actually get, because I was a huge wrestling fan when I was a kid. My father used to take me to the matches, when I was little, in the early 60s. Yeah. And my father I grew up in Westchester, just up from New York City, and my father was the head of music for Parks and Recreation. So he used to be able to get me into the circus and wrestling matches and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was a really nice thing that we kind of got to share together, because I think he really, he was obviously seeing a lot more than I was and understanding different levels of it. But for me, I just loved it. I just loved it. Yeah. Bruno Sammartino. Uh-huh. No, those were that was my era of Gorilla Monsoon. Mm-hmm. And my favorite, he's kind of obscure, but he was my favorite. He wasn't a big guy, but he was like a gymnast. He could flip, and he had this thing where he would lock somebody around their neck with his ankles, and then he'd get himself over to the top rope.
Yeah. Can I guess who this is?
Walk around the ring with his hands. His name was Argentino Apollo.
Mm-hmm. It was Argentina Rocca.
What's that?
Or was it Argentina Rocca?
Nope, Argentino Apollo.
All right, yeah, very cool. There's, you were asking me how I see wrestling, and even as a kid, I never thought this is a real thing, but that never bothered me. It's a weird thing to explain to someone never watched wrestling before, because they automatically think, think it's this legit sport or something, but it's really its own form of entertainment. It's very athletic, and it's also can be theatrical, and I just always got a kick out of it.
And it's so openly ironic, right?
Yeah, definitely, especially nowadays.
You know what I mean?
I kind of think it always was. But...
What's that?
I kind of think it always was to a degree, but especially in the last, couple decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I also do a wrestling podcast, and I've interviewed Bruno Sammartino.
Do you?
Yeah, I've interviewed Bruno, which was a great honor to have Bruno on the show.
Wow. He reigned supreme the whole time that I was going to the matches and stuff.
Yeah.
But his nemesis was pretty much Gorilla Monsoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always the big foreign heels, the foreign menace, because I think Gorilla was we billed him from I'm not sure where, but from some other country.
Yes, mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's just so far before your time, but there was this guy that used to be able to ripple his stomach and literally make ripples in it, and a guy would be holding him around the waist, and he'd start rippling his stomach, and for some weird reason the guy would go and it would pull him apart. It would pull his hands apart just by the fact that he could do this thing.
Uh-huh. That's pretty awesome. So I don't know how we got into wrestling, but it does. The wrestling does tie into earlier when I said there was one person who hung up on me. It was actually a professional wrestler. It was the Iron Sheik.
It?
Yeah, the Iron Sheik.
Iron Sheik. Now, I guess you can cut it out, but what happened?
Yeah, no, I'll leave it in. It's fine. So it was 2005. It was the first year we were doing the wrestling show. And it was, I don't know if you've ever heard him on Howard Stern, Iron Sheik, but this was before he was on, before he did Howard Stern or anything. And so he came on the show, and it was I don't know if you've ever heard the Iron Sheik talk, but on the wrestling show, I'd use the name Jack. So he's like, Mr. Jack, very intelligent man in the Boston area, all my paisans. And so he's going on and on. And I just heard the story where it was like there was a promoter in Boston, and he said the Iron Sheik held him hostage in a car. So anyway, he's talking about this guy, Mr. I forget his name now, but this promoter and stuff. And then I was like, oh, I just heard about that online. He said that you held him hostage in a car. And I didn't think about the word hostage, and he's Middle Eastern, and he just blew up on me. He's like, I do not be comedy. I'm not Saddam Hussein. I am all American. And he told me he's going to break my back, and then he just hung up on me. And I was like, well, it was like a 5-minute interview, but at the time, it was the most hits I ever had.
Did you wind up running it?
Oh yeah, because it was that one was actually live. So it was live on the show, and then I put up the archive, and still some people today will tell me that's their favorite interview of mine, and I always like, I'm not really trying to take that. It's like, really, I've done like hours with other people, but hey, whatever.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So being into jazz, how did you end up being a rock musician?
Because it really was, the whole time that those were the records that I would listen to, I was playing in rock and roll bands. I started out as a drummer. So when I was, 8 or 9 or something, I took up the drums. Before that, I actually played the cello. But it was like the saving grace of my early life to be always in a rock band. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes when you're young like that, kids are coming from different schools or they're leaving or whatever. And so we never had a keyboard player. So then I started picking out stuff on the piano and bought a little Farfisa organ, and then that was what I was sort of, and it served me well, right? Because somebody that, they don't really do this anymore, but in rock bands in the 80s and 70s, you had to have a guy that was like a utility player, who could play saxophone, and how often are you playing saxophone, right? You can't play all the time. Mm-hmm. So every sax player had to play keyboards, and you had to play some sort of percussion. And for me, I really liked playing electronic percussion. And you had to, like, Tina had a song all of a sudden that had blues harp in it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, geez, I guess I better learn it, because I can't imagine the drummer playing it or the bass player playing it. They're too busy. Mm-hmm. So these little things just sort of, and then we had certain songs that really needed like a wind synth, that had a little more expression than a regular synthesizer. So I got into that, and that's pretty much learning a few instruments was really just for just for survival. Yeah.
So
you had to do it.
So when did music become like this is what you're going to do? This is going to be, my life. This is going to be like a job.
Forever. Mm-hmm. Forever. My father had a music school. Like I said, he was the head of music for Westchester County, and he I think he saw something in me, and then he really, his side of the family is Sicilian, so I don't think there was really much of a chance to go up against him. He really, the way somebody might want you to be a doctor and take over, right, or take over the family business. Mm-hmm. I think that's what he was going to insist on, and my rebellion was playing music that was different than he liked. He was a jazz guy, but he was also really loved classical music. He was a Juilliard guy, and he really wanted that for me. But I think he really wanted me to be a classical musician. And I just kept, like I said, I started out on drums, and then I went to keyboards because I thought the band could use it, and I just tried picking out some notes. And then as I started getting into jazz, maybe about 13 or 14, I just said, I got to get one of these. I got to see if it's possible, to learn this thing, because I just thought it was the coolest sound. Mm-hmm. And of course now, there hasn't been a saxophone solo on a hit record in 20, 25 years. Yeah. So it's really out of favor, but I don't care. Yeah. It really is the instrument that I love. I practice it every day, and I want to, stay confident on it and have my chops in shape. And, it's still, surprisingly enough, on a daily and weekly basis, it's still how I make a living, sort of in the trenches, playing any sort of gig, whether it's at a club or it's a wedding or a fundraiser or whatever. There's my sort of codpiece side, where I do conventions and will play, the music that's sort of me. But then I also, I don't think I'd be able to make a living if I didn't have my suit and tie gigs. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm always leading a band for some function or other.
Sure. So, what your father, you said, more in the classical stuff. So, what was his take when you really get your whole persona going with the codpiece and with chain around your neck?
Well, he I don't want to bring you down. He died really.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
that's okay. He was only maybe 44, 45 when he died. So I was only 10 years old, and obviously it was a major bummer, and it was really a horrible thing for the whole family. But it freed me up a little bit musically, because I knew that I always had to sort of fight him on stuff. Mm-hmm. And I gave up the cello, and I really devoted myself to more jazz and rock music.
Yeah. So
and R&B, which I really love. Right, all saxophone players not only love jazz, but we love rhythm and blues, and we love King Curtis, and we love Junior Walker, and those guys are important to us.
Mm-hmm. So I know obviously later on you played with Tina Turner and Ringo Starr, and they were already established names. Was Peter Gabriel at that time when you played with him? Was he really known yet?
I played on and toured with his second record. I don't know if you're familiar with his solo stuff. But just after he left Genesis, he had the album that had Salisbury Hill on it, and then this was the second record. If you've ever seen it in the stores, it's the one where he's scratching the sky. He's scratching and every place that he's scratching, it's all white and like he's scratched out the picture itself.
Right. Yeah, I gotcha.
Robert Fripp produced that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I played on a couple tunes with that, and then he wanted to see if I was, he gave me an audition on keyboards, and thank God I passed the audition because it was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really fun gig. He was such a gentleman and so creative and always like looking for something. Obviously people know that he tries to do things a little differently and put his own stamp on it.
Mm-hmm.
But that really was the way he was. He would, if there was I remember one time he just went out. There was a convention of sort of security systems, and to him that was music too. So he went out, and I think his next record was called Security. So he was always just picking up stuff out of his life, and somebody that was always on the hunt.
Yeah. Yeah. When you play with someone, how important is the chemistry? I mean, you could be like a great musician, but maybe if you don't have chemistry, does it not work?
Oh, boy, you really got to be flexible and try to suss out what the person is like, and then try to fit yourself around that, right? You're an employee, and this is your boss.
Mm-hmm.
So you do everything that you can to stay true to yourself, but be as much of the kind of player that they want you to be. Mm-hmm. It really is just a job, and you don't have the final say. So, Tina wanted different stuff out of me than Peter did, and Carly Simon wanted different stuff out of me,
mm-hmm.
than obviously Billy Crystal did, or Eric Carmen or something. They all had such different styles, and sometimes it's a little tough because it may not really be your style.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta try to absorb it, like listen to all their records and figure out where they're coming from, and like listen to their personalities and how they like to have their employees be. Some are really tough people, and some are just very flexible and easy to get along with.
Mm-hmm. Something I read about you is that you had a heroin problem, and then you're over that. But how hard was that to kick, and how hard was that to stay away from when you're touring with with rock bands?
The bodybuilding really saved my butt. There's different levels of addiction, right? Mm-hmm. If you've been addicted to really, injecting heroin, which I never did.
Mm-hmm.
I always just snorted it. And I was into it for about a year and a half, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And my story about that is that on my 25th birthday, my mother threw a little party for me, And I went down to her house, and my niece opened the door. She was about 12. And she instantly started screaming and locked herself in the bathroom. And that was pretty tough. That was a pretty tough thing. And I remember my mother coming up to my apartment with me just to sort of stay with me. And I didn't think I was in bad shape at all. I really didn't. I didn't know, I'm putting makeup on pimples and trying to make myself presentable. And I thought I was fine. But obviously I was far from fine. But when that happened, my mother was in the next room, and she was, there was no door between the two rooms, and I could hear her trying to suppress her crying, so that I wouldn't hear it. Mm-hmm. And that went through me like a knife. It was just, that hit me so hard. It wasn't, if she'd been wailing and weeping, it might have been a little different. But something about these little tiny sounds that you could tell she was trying to cover up with a pillow, and that was really tough. And I never took it again.
Yeah.
Never took it again. And it wasn't that hard. I went through probably the worst flu I've ever had, but it was never like, oh my God, like the man with the golden arm or something, like, oh, I've got to have this. I guess I hadn't done it. I hadn't gotten addicted enough to the point where I didn't just have to go through a cleansing that I really didn't even associate with, like, oh man, I got to go out and get some more and get myself straight. I just let that out. As a matter of fact, I gave up smoking at the same time, and that was the one that was tougher.
Yeah.
That was the one that kept coming into the back of my mind, like, you really want a cigarette? Like, I really want a cigarette. So I was lucky. I was really lucky that way. Yeah. And got myself, I walked up to this like really funky, old, like low rent gym that was above a plumbing supply store. And it was in my neighborhood. And I just went up there and got involved with all these muscle heads. And it really did. It really made things so much easier. I really enjoyed, because when I was, my natural body type is really, really skinny. So I'm 6 foot tall. When I started working out, I was maybe 135 pounds. That's really skinny.
Yeah.
Right. So I enjoyed sort of being a different person, that had some strength and a little more masculinity and a little more sort of confidence, in just in my physical self, That was really nice. That was very, very fortunate that I got in with all these dudes, and some of them are still pretty good friends.
Cool. A friend of mine who had a heroin addiction, what's kept him clean for years now is running, and he said it maybe it's the same kind of thing. He said it gives him the same kind of high in a way, but it's a natural high, and he does it all the time. He's a totally different person, for it. And it's great to see.
I still have to work out pretty much every day. You know what I mean? And towards the sort of earlier part of the day for those. I still need those chemicals. I definitely have. I guess I didn't know it at the time, but I think I've always had anxiety issues. My parents were kind of nervous people, and I have anxiety issues. So one thing that really helps me quite a bit is working out, and I kind of have to do it. Like I said, 6 or 7 days a week. It's pretty essential. So I really understand what your friend is talking about.
Yeah. This was kind of weird to me. It was yesterday. I did an interview with the star of a new movie coming out, Summer of '84. And so I recorded that. Right after I recorded it, I was like looking up some little tidbits about you for the interview. And so I saw this interview you did about Tina Turner, and the first line was "in the summer of '84," and I was like, "That's so weird," because I just did this interview with a guy from a movie, The Summer of '84. So anyway, can you tell us about the summer of '84 when you met Tina Turner?
Sure. I was really lucky. Almost every gig I got because of two brothers that are both very successful drummers. One is named Rick Murata, and his younger brother, who I went to school with, is Jerry Murata. And so Jerry got me the gig with Peter Gabriel. Jerry got me so many gigs, and Rick got me the audition with Tina. And because he was such a well-respected musician, I don't even think they looked at anybody else. So that was really, really, really fortunate for me. And I remember the first time I met her, I went to her dressing room. She was opening for Lionel Richie at the Forum in LA. It was just as Private Dancer and What's Love Got to Do with It was coming out. What's Love Got to Do with It was not yet a big hit, but they were out and there was a lot of buzz about her. And quite frankly, when Rick told me about it, I wasn't that excited because I just kind of figured it was going to be a pretty low rent gig. And I went in and she was in a bathrobe, getting ready for the show, and she was, this is a person who really knows what she wants and is tough. She's a tough person. You know what I mean? She's not a fainting flower at all. She really, you know, what I came out of the meeting was, wow, this is really somebody who, the vibe with her is like, if you're really lucky, I'll consent to be your boss. Mm-hmm. And I mean that in a really literal sense. You know, I kind of feel, and I don't want to give a negative impression of her, but I think that she, you know, how did she come up? She came up with Ike. So that's the only way she really knew how to run a band. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That was the way that she thought. So it was really like an employer-employee situation, whereas that gets blurred with a lot of people. You know, when I played with Peter, it was just like a guy, or Carly Simon was just a woman who was tried as hard as she could to make herself the equal of the band, you know, and be personable and engage in conversation and things like that. With Tina, it was absolutely boss-employee situation. And nothing wrong with that. You know, obviously, everybody would like somebody that was forthcoming and showed interest in them and gave them compliments and things like that. But you were just never going to get that from her. You just never get it. So you learned real early that, and you know, maybe she wasn't like that with everybody, although from what I saw over 15 years she was. But she said that when I left that little first meeting, she said, oh, this guy's going to be trouble. So she had her doubts about me, right? I walk in a tank top and, you know, and the long hair and everything. And I think, you know, she really thought, oh boy, do I really want to get involved with somebody who, you know, looks like he thinks a lot of himself and is, you know, gonna be pushing for, you know, like pushing to be a featured member of the band and all that stuff. And I don't blame her. I think she was right. We often got into stuff where she'd say, oh, no, stay back there. And then I'd get real mad and say, well, this thing fell apart. You didn't let me go out and work the crowd. You know, because I thought that she just didn't, she had a thing about giving people too much time. You know what I mean? It really had to be the focus on her. But when she'd be making her costume changes, somebody's got to go out there and do it. So over the years, we developed more honesty and more, I could push back to her, and, you know, I could get a little angry and say, is this what you want to happen? You really want this to just fall apart when you leave? Or do you want to give me or Kenny Moore or, you know, the people that are featured, do you want to give us something that we can help out with? You know, I'm not trying to be an egomaniac, but if I don't go out to the front of the stage and try to sell this while you're changing your clothes or at the end of the concert, what do we got? You know, you're just hurting yourself. But I think for her, she really didn't, you know, she had a thing. Like, in other words, in 1987, have you ever heard of Kenny Moore before?
No, I haven't. Sorry.
Kenny was her number 2 person. Like, he was her right hand. And he was with her way before she was famous the second time as a solo artist. And he was magnificent. He was an incredible gospel singer and piano player. And for her to have that was such a blessing. And yet in 1987, when the second record came out, she just fired us both. I mean, she didn't even fire us. She just didn't call us.
Oh.
You know, the next tour came around, and both of us were just like, they're on the road again? You know, and I had even played on the record.
Yeah.
I didn't, you know, there were certain things that she did that I think that maybe she just wanted, you know, it's too much. It's my stage, and that's all there is to it. But, you know, on the other hand, she was very honest, and she just said, yeah, I tried to keep you off, but people kept asking for you, so I brought you back. You know, That's and she had a wonderful sense of honesty, or just about having no qualms about saying what she really thought.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I don't think too many people would say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to get rid of you, but a lot of people have been asking for you, so I thought, oh,
right. Yeah, they would make up something else, but yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So she brought me and Kenny back, you know.
Mm-hmm. So, when you've torn with her and stuff, when did the I Still Believe that the role in the movie come about? Like, who approached you about
Well,
it?
you know, I mean, that's the thing about it, right? I just got lucky in that when I joined her band, all of a sudden, she became the darling of MTV.
Mm-hmm.
And the directors would always have me do a little piece of business, you know, like in the Mad Max videos and stuff like that. They'd have me play on the record, and they'd have me, you know, give me a little spot in the video.
Mm-hmm.
And that really led to just a lot of calls out of the blue. Oh, do you want to do Miami Vice? Oh, do you want to do The Equalizer? Oh, do you want to be in this movie or that movie? And I don't know if I've overtold this story, but it's just the way it went. I was auditioning for the Gary Busey part in Lethal Weapon.
Oh, wow.
And obviously I didn't get it, but some guy I never met while I was sitting there he just came up to me. His name is Joel Sill. He's a music producer and music publisher and a what they call an executive music producer,
Mm-hmm.
which I think he was pretty close to inventing that title, because his first movie when he was a teenager was Easy Rider. And you know, that's, I don't know, you know a lot more about movies than I do, but to me that seems like a watershed movie in terms of actually using famous songs and
Mm-hmm.
placing them in the right spots, and you know, so that was what he did. He was always involved in movies, and lucky me, he just happened to walk by and went, "Somebody I want you to meet. Come here, come with me." And he just walked me into Joel Schumacher's office. Joel said, "You want to sing a song in a movie?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Okay, I'll let you know when it happens, and I'll see you then." I don't think I was in his office for more than 2 minutes.
So well, when you actually do it, go on, sorry.
No, you know, since I always thought that I was much more well known for Tina, because I was with, it was such a huge part of my life for
Mm-hmm.
15 years, you know.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Like a marriage, you know. And yet, you know, when I go to conventions and stuff, I hardly sell any pictures of me and Tina. It's all about this, you know, 12-second appearance that took about 3 hours to do out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
That still, you know, is a major part of my life, and yet, with very few exceptions, nobody even knows I played with her. You know, it just doesn't matter. People at this point don't even know who she was, right?
Yeah, it's strange, but
you know, a lot of young people.
Is that a weird feeling to you, especially when you first kind of discovered it, that like this thing that you like said 3 hours out of your life is something that so many people remember and talk to you about?
I thank my lucky stars for that.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like, how many people get that 30, 31 years later, this tiny little thing. You know, how long was I on screen? Maybe a minute tops.
Mm-hmm.
That it still is a thing where I can go play gigs because of it, and can, you know, sell T-shirts and like I can, it's a really positive thing. I also am really, feel so fortunate that, Joel Schumacher also let me write a song to see if it would be better than I Still Believe. And it wasn't. It sounded like a song you'd write because somebody said, write a song for this movie, right?
Right.
Whereas I Still Believe it's coming from a pretty deep place. So I'm really, really, one of the things that obviously I wasn't thrilled about it at the time, but one of the things that I'm really happiest about is that I didn't get to sing my song. I got to sing this really wonderful song that's deep and that's true and sincere and unusually so.
Had you were you familiar with the song before? Had you ever sang it before?
This sounds like bullshit, but when that audition that I just told you about, I was actually about 5 minutes late because I was in the car and heard the song. And you know how you can't turn it off?
Right.
When you're in your car, you just leave your car running and I was really moved by it. And before he told me, like right after I went and bought the cassette. I was really moved by the song. And so that's an amazing coincidence.
Yeah, that's yeah. See,
I've never
it
sung.
like it just was meant to happen.
I just, it's hard to say. Whatever, everybody has their own leanings about coincidence and stuff like that. But that was amazing. That on that same day, it was part of the day. A big part of the day. And so when he said, "Oh, I'd like you to sing this song," well, I already knew it because I had been listening to that album quite a bit, and especially that song.
Yeah. So when they filmed the scene there, like you said, it was about 3 hours. You just sing that one song. You don't sing other songs, or
nope, just that one song. And we maybe did. I don't think we did. Like I think we just did one take of every shot. You know what I mean? There had to be things where I was, where Jamie Gertz would come by and we had to be seen, or, they were covering a lot of stuff with the main characters. And, but I don't think there was more than one or two takes of anything. I was shocked. I mean, you know about movies. The one thing you can count on is that they're going to take 20 times longer than you think it's possible that they could take.
Right.
And this literally was done from start to finish in 3 hours. I was back in Corey Haim's room. We were having a party, and the night was still young. Right. It was crazy. It's like 10 o'clock.
What was that party like? I'm sorry. It
didn't take all night till the sun came up.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 or 11 o'clock, we were back at the Holiday Inn having a party in Corey's room.
So what was that party like? What was Corey Haim like?
Corey Haim was the most, he was just this adorable little kid. And my big story and my big takeaway from that was that he was so young, but he really was like an adult. Like you had no choice but to talk with him like an adult. And the other thing was the party got a little loud, and they called the cops. And when Corey heard the knock at the door, and this is just a small Holiday Inn, motel room. Mm-hmm. So there was 20 of us in there or something. And so he knew what it was. We were playing music really loud. We were dancing. And he just looked at everybody and went, "Watch this." And the cops came, and I don't know how he did this, but they were obviously ready to be very hostile and, at the very least, shut this down. And, if there was marijuana involved or if there was drinking with underage kids, they were ready to go. Mm-hmm. But he just looked at everybody and said, "Watch this." And he went and he did this charm thing on these cops that by the end of maybe 10 or 15 minutes, they had their arms around him and they were kind of very timidly saying, "All right, well, just try to keep it down. Don't worry about it too much. These people around here are just..." I mean, I had never seen a bullshit job like this in my life. I've never seen charisma like that in my entire life. And obviously what that was about, was a huge, because I was going, "Oh my God, I'd trade anything for that talent." Mm-hmm. That is some talent to have, to just be able to charm the pants off anybody. Mm-hmm. At age, how old was he? 14, 13?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of confidence, that kind of IQ, that kind of everything, but it obviously proved to be a real negative too. Right. Because he could just get anybody to do anything he wanted, and he knew it. And it was funny because we had a panel, and it was in Indianapolis at a convention, and it was the first time that Corey Feldman was at, that I was at one with him. Mm-hmm. It was pretty much everybody, all the survivors from the movie. Yeah. And when I said that story, Corey just went, "That is Corey to a T. That is exactly that. It sounds exact like he had seen a million situations like that."
Wow.
And, I guess, is there a talent that isn't, that doesn't have a negative aspect to it?
Right, right. Did you hang out with Corey Feldman at all at the time, or just
you know what?
On?
I don't think he was on that night shoot.
Yeah,
I don't think he was at the party. Mm-hmm. I think all the people that were at that concert shoot, right, were there. So Jamie was there, and just everybody that was at that concert that had, because there was that little story where that's where they first meet and that kind of thing. So anybody that was in that shot just kind of got out of the van and just went right to Corey's room and hung out for a while.
Mm-hmm. I got a question here from Eben McGar. He wants to know. Yeah,
one of my favorites.
One of my favorites too. He wants to know, what was it like? What did you think when he reached out to you about coming to a Mad Monster party?
Well, he really changed my life. He really changed my life. I had, I just thought of myself who was, for the 26 years or something since the movie, had just totally forgotten about it. Nobody had reached out to me in any way. Nobody had, tried to get me to conventions or done anything like that. My hair was short. I dropped 30 pounds. I wasn't too worried about, keeping my physique up. What do I need that for? Right? Who needs that option?
Mm-hmm.
So he really did change my life. There's this whole other part of my life now, where I'm about 90% done with my first CD, my first record.
Oh, nice.
And so all of these things come from Eben's call. Mm-hmm. It just conventions are a part of my life. Having merchandise and having something that helps out with the bills, and yesterday I gave a Skype sax lesson, and there's all these things that have been improved in my life just by that one call.
Yeah.
Because once he did that, and he not only Eben, not only, as well as, I don't know if you know Chris Ott, London 1888.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I have many patches and pins of Chris Ott.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
He's amazing. And between the two of them, they've gotten me maybe 90% of my conventions.
Oh, no, wow.
And
awesome.
And so they have sort of taken me under their wing and given me, and then other people will know that I did one, so they'll go, oh, that guy does these now. Oh, good.
Yeah.
So I'll call him.
Yeah.
And usually they, if when that happens, the first thing I'll do is call Eben and Chris and ask what they think about
about the particular convention
show.
Yeah.
Or like whether it's a good one, whether one promoter hates another promoter.
Yeah, right.
So that if you do this one, you can't do that. All that crazy politics.
Yeah. I know it all too well. I started doing the conventions in 2011 or 2012, and then I was just having a good time, and then I found out that there's all these weird, infightings, and actually, same way. I'll ask Eben his. I go to all the Mad Monsters. Actually, I wasn't at the one you were at that year because I was very sick and I was in the hospital. But Eben's definitely one of the a guy you can trust.
He's a guy you can trust, and he's an extremely creative guy. There's this wonderful sort of layered approach that he takes to his conventions that nobody else bothers with.
Mm-hmm.
He just has this wonderful sense of pop irony that he brings along with him to whatever he does. He's a very, very smart guy. Mm-hmm. And I always know I can go to him for advice, and I'm going to get some good advice.
Yeah. I just made my return to Mad Monster last month at the Charlotte one. It's my first one in a couple of years. Yeah.
Now, do you participate? Do you go and hang out, or do you have a booth, or what?
Yeah. Kind of both. Eben's great guy, always sets me up with a booth, so we always have a Without Your Head booth there, and I also like to hang out and have fun too, and do some interviews. I also like the last few years I started after I get sick. It kind of changes your outlook on stuff, and so when I go to the conventions, I also like to check out the area, so it's not like I'm just in a hotel the whole time. You get to see wherever you happen to be, like in Dallas or whatever. And
sure.
So I have a great time.
Yeah. I'm forever in his debt.
Mm-hmm.
he found my number out of one of those, like actually paid to try to find my cell number. Paid a service to find out where I lived and to ask if I wanted to do it. And it just, I had no idea that anybody had any interest at all. Like zero. I knew I had a Wikipedia page that I had nothing to do with. I knew that people would write articles like whatever happened to this guy by Googling it, but I had absolutely no idea. And but obviously it is important. I mean, I've had people come up to me and just break into tears, and like you, they were sick and maybe had some troubles, and it helped them. So I, those things are wonderful to find out.
Just so you know, or anyone listening doesn't know, I'm fine now, but it was a bad experience.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
What did you, how long were you sick? What did you have?
I don't know if you know diverticulitis, which, I actually thought it was.
Diverticulitis is in your GI tract, yes?
Right. So those are my colon. So I went to I'll tell a story real quick. I went to the doctor, said a pain in my side, which I thought was gas, but didn't go away. The terrible, terrible pain. They sent me home with just some, not even any painkillers, and it got much worse in 2 days. I was actually screaming in pain. It was very bad. So I went back to the ER. My brother drove me, and right away, as soon as they saw me, they took me in and they did CAT scan. Well, not CAT scan, but whatever, X-ray. And my colon had perforated, so my body was filling up with waste, and I was dying. And so they did emergency surgery, and they removed 14 inches of my colon. And I woke up with I'd have a colostomy bag for a while. I was in the ICU. It was really bad experience. And from there, I had they could do reversal surgery if I got, into better shape and stuff. So I started walking a lot. And in about 3 months, they were able to reconnect me, so I don't have the colostomy bag anymore. And then from there, which is great because it was not good to have. And
I wouldn't think that would be a great thing to go through.
No, definitely. No, it was very bad. And even after that, then I had some complications because, so I had 72 staples down the center of my stomach, and the big hole in the side where they had the colostomy bag, the stoma. And for that, after they do reversal surgery, they don't sew that up because it's like a big open wound, and so I had a wound vac, which is another thing that's not very fun to have. It's like a little mechanical box that like sucks the dead skin and stuff out of your wound, and that started to fill up with red blood. And I had a visiting nurse every day, and she came to like, "This is not good."
You were like on your back for how long? You were on your back for how long?
I was in the hospital. I was in ICU in the hospital for 3 weeks, and then I was in rehab for 2 weeks to learn to change my colostomy bag and walk and stuff because I couldn't walk for a while. And then I was home for 3 months, and then I had the reversal surgery, and then I was in the hospital again for a couple weeks. And then when I came home, I had the complications, and I actually started to bleed out, and they had to call 911, and which was
my Lord.
Yeah, they cut me out of my clothes because it was soaked in blood. It was literally like a movie. I mean, I honestly thought I was dying because I just thought there's no way anyone can lose this much blood. And it was just like a movie. You're in the ambulance and they're telling you stay with me, and they put trauma sheets on me, which what they do if you got a gunshot wound. And I bled through 4 of those. And from my socks to my shirt, it was just soaked in blood. They had to cut me out of it.
Oh my God.
And so then that happened. So then I was readmitted to the hospital, and that happened 2 more times while I was in the hospital. It started to bleed out. And so then I had several blood transfusions, and then I was anemic for a long time. And so it was probably altogether probably about 6 months, I guess. And then recovery after that. So, but I'm doing very well now. So.
You're doing pretty good now.
Yeah. Actually, my friend who I was telling you about, who runs a lot, because he, instead of being on heroin, he got me into walking and stuff, and so we have the same app, and we can look, how long each other, walks for, and he's way ahead of me, but still, it's I do try to do a couple of miles every day at least. I'm doing good.
So maybe it was a blessing in disguise. I mean, you know what I mean? It'll have a positive effect on the rest of your life.
Yeah. I've said the same thing, because it, made me get in better shape all around, and I have a lot of scars, but nothing permanent. Permanent scars, but no permanent damage of any kind.
Oh, wow, that's some story. Holy Moses.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. It is. So, where were we? By the way, you mentioned that you do the Skype thing. How can people find that? If you want to have a Skype conversation with you.
Oh, on timcappello.com, I have a little shop that has buttons and T-shirts, and where I'm going to put the record and the download, pictures and stuff like that. Usually people kind of find me just through my Facebook page, and then find that store through that. So, if you were just to Google Tim Cappello Facebook, that would come up. And I think that's usually how people find me. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Maybe there's better ways to do it, but I'm not much of a businessman. I don't really know too much about that stuff, but it seems to work pretty well. I'm really very happy. Like I said, I never would have suspected. I never would have suspected that anybody gave half a shit at all. That would actually, get a T-shirt or be interested in an album of mine or anything like that. And it's not true. So, again, Evan, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, the Christopher Ott pin is awesome. I love his artwork anyway. And
it is.
You have it. Yeah, you have an autograph one on on your website.
That's right. I do the pin. Chris is so sweet. And it's so funny. I had to say to him, man, were you raised Italian? Because he just won't take any money. He'll just dump a big box of pins or posters. He did this amazing poster for me. And I'll have to when my father and my Uncle Minnie would get together, the last half hour, they would be chasing each other around the house with $20 bills. No, here, get Lena something. Get Mary a nice dress. And they would be stuffing money into each other's and not taking it, then taking it out and stuffing it back. And Chris I'll try to say, okay, how much do I owe you? You just paid out like a couple $100, and you won't tell me how. And I have to chase the guy. He's just the sweetest person. But I think I know that from being raised Sicilian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, like in Broadway Danny Rose, where they're ripping up the money.
Right. Very cool. Yeah.
Mere fascination.
Yeah. So,
what does it mean, really? In the greater scope of things, what does it really mean?
Exactly. That's very true. See, we get a couple more questions here from Facebook, if you don't mind, if I ask them.
Okay.
Ian Messenger wants to know, were you ever asked to do any of the sequels, and would you ever return for a sequel to Lost Boys?
I never heard about these sequels. Kind of knowing, maybe I would have done it out of ignorance,
right.
But knowing what I know about it, sort of direct to DVD, if I wasn't really hard up for money, I probably wouldn't have done them.
Yeah.
If Joel Schumacher was going to do it again,
sure,
I would do it. But like I'm 63 years old, I'm not exactly sure. What place he would have for me. Like time marches on, and people need to see young people, doing these things. But I
cameo
sure, like I said, I really love the fact that when I do a show, I perform the song or I play a set or whatever, that the fact that I'm, their grandfather's age and am still, giving it my best shot and shaking those hips to the best of my ability and playing and singing. It really is lovely because I just see these huge, broad smiles when I look at pictures of these gigs, that you're still in there and you're still pitching. It just, I can see that it makes people happy. So I really do continue with it. That's why I'm making this record, because I'd like to do a lot of concerts.
Yeah.
Of a one-man show. I've got some I've got some visuals, little movies that I make that go along with stuff, and we do the star. She has those crazy kind of little geeky kind of moves that she does. So I made a loop of that and get the audience to do the star with all of her little hair combs and windmills and that little clap push thing that she does. So it's fun. It's really a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm hoping whether it's house concerts, clubs, pubs, anything, I would really like to do this one-man show as much as I can. It really feels like my album. My album is called Blood on the Reed, and it's mostly covers from sort of the classic era of rock sax that I try to put my own spin on. Just songs that I really love, that I try to give a twist to. Yeah, I'm hoping that's in my future.
Yeah.
I'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Oh, I would like to hear that as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
did I answer his question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Jeff Ball wants to know, did you ever think the appearance would be such an iconic moment, and do you still perform I Still Believe?
Yes. Well, no to the first part.
right.
I never ever thought that it would be anything that people would remember 30 years later. I just, or that they would do a thing about me on Saturday Night Live, or it just, there was nothing about it that that I ever thought would last. You know, you do gigs and you do these gigs, and like I said, it took so short a time that it just never registered. So I never thought it would be just anything, or that it was. Spent 26 or 27 years sort of just under the assumption that it was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to conventions and people are like, Tim Cappello, holy shit. And I just can't believe that anybody remembers that. It totally freaks me out.
Yeah.
And what was the second half of it?
Do you still perform I Still Believe?
Yes. Like I said, I perform. Every time I do a convention, I perform I Still Believe.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'll play a concert. Not a concert, but like I said, like a fundraiser or a company party or a private party of some kind, and they'll know that's me,
mm-hmm.
and they'll say, my mother and I used to watch this movie together, once a month. So would you play it? And I'm always totally overjoyed. And I guess the big change that I'm waiting to see is when my record comes out, will I be able to, will I hold people's interest with a full set of material?
Yeah.
Have no idea.
Right.
But I'm giving it a shot. I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah. I know people at the conventions are very supportive of people. So I hope they, support your original album and you get behind it.
Yeah, me too. It would be a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprisingly enough at this late stage of my life, I'm really not ready to hang up the codpiece.
Mm-hmm. Not many people can pull off the codpiece look.
I don't want anybody to pull off the codpiece. Absolutely.
Very, very true. Very true. I was like, there's a couple more things. I saw on your Facebook page that on Waco, on the miniseries Waco, they played your song. Well, they played.
I was shocked.
Yeah,
I was shocked. I believe that they were playing the Call's version, right? The Call was a Christian band. Yeah. So that's what it sounded like to me. But then I was totally shocked that the FBI had all these oil drums filled with fire in their compound, in their tents and stuff, to keep warm, I guess. But I really felt that was a lovely little nod to my contribution to the song.
Yeah. I didn't even notice actually. Now you mentioned, because I'm looking at the pictures and the fire coming up is it's a nice little nod to your performance. Yeah,
I don't think that's anything but that. I don't think that's coincidence or anything like that. But on the other hand, as I said, that original version, I just try to do my best.
Mm-hmm.
But that original version is pretty amazing.
Yeah, really, the whole soundtrack of Lost Boys is great.
It is a good soundtrack.
Yeah,
it is a good soundtrack. And you know something? It's so weird. It's 30 years, but both from the my appearance in the movie and the soundtrack, I still, like 4 times a year, I still get a pretty decent little check.
Oh, well, that's an added bonus, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these other little things I've done, I'll get, $3.50 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, that just makes me know. I mean, and in an era when nobody buys records. Nobody buys records.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right. I think there's a lot of great songs on that soundtrack, right?
Yeah.
The remake of People Are Strange, and of course, Gerard McMahon's theme song. That's just Cry Little Sister is just amazing.
Yeah, it's really haunting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah,
so beautiful. I'm glad I got to finally meet him and hang out with him a little bit.
Nice. Yeah. I will, one last question here, because I know it was a lot longer than I said, but what did you think of the movie Lost Boys when you first saw it?
I thought it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I really thought, wow, I was lucky, because this is a good movie. I mean, do you like it?
I love it. I went to see it. I saw it when it came out at the theater, and I loved it then. And I watch it now, and it's not only does it still hold up, it's when you get older, you appreciate different things about the movie. And I think it's a great movie. Well, when I was a kid, I saw it more of a comedy horror, and there's still obviously comedy, but it's much more serious when I watch it now that I'm older.
That's interesting. I'll have to go and watch it again.
Yeah,
I'll have to go and watch it again, and to see what you're telling me.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice contrast of especially the Lost Boys themselves are much more serious, and then it has some lighthearted stuff, but it's a good combination of both. But there's definitely a lot more serious stuff than I remember as a kid.
You think they struck a nice balance? That was really good.
But sometimes it's hard to pull off, especially like in a horror movie. If you have some comedy, sometimes the horror doesn't work. But I think it both works.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree. Do you consider The Lost Boys a horror movie? I mean, I guess it's about vampires, and vampires are part of the horror lexicon. But
yeah, it's kind of like going back to what I said. I don't always because some people argue about the genres of movie, but I just like the movie. So, but it's definitely It's definitely like a lot of a dramatic horror movie as well. So
that's kind of what I thought about it. Like, I don't think I've quite seen anything exactly like this.
Mm-hmm.
If you know what I mean, it just had, like you said, there's a lightheartedness to it, but it's I don't know really how to explain it, but I could almost, if you had said no, it's not a horror movie, I could have seen the point to that too.
Sure.
Just seems like somehow it's a little bit of a different genre bending thing.
Because I don't think it's a movie where you have to be a horror movie fan to enjoy it. I think a lot of
that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah,
that's probably why it's lasted. Because a lot of movies come and go, and sometimes I like to watch old Siskel and Eberts on YouTube. And it's always weird to me, some big movies that were up for Oscars and stuff, and no one ever talks about them anymore. But then there's movies that stick around forever and always find a new audience.
Yeah, sure. I definitely know that The Lost Boys is one of those.
Yeah, because
I mean, when I'm at conventions, I get grandparents, parents, and little kids.
Yeah.
That share it. That share that interest and their family. It'll be a family movie.
Yeah, because I think it's scary enough. It's not like a kiddish movie, so you can watch it when you're adult. And while it's scary and stuff, it's not really graphic that a kid can't watch it. Who can take some more stuff. So it's definitely a movie any age I think can watch.
Sure, I mean I actually have a very weak stomach.
Mm-hmm.
I just, a lot of gore really gets to me, and it literally scares me. You know, as I said, I sort of have a lot of anxiety. Just, you know, it's kind of an anxiety disorder. And so I actually literally get scared. My wife and I watched Get Out, which I thought was an awesome movie, and I loved it.
I was a big
but
fan,
when it turned red, I was scared. Like I was scared. You know, like a little kid would be scared. Like, oh, this is too much. I can't handle this. I had to kind of leave the room. And I loved the movie a lot. And she was looking at me like, what are you talking about? You know, but yeah, so I'm pretty much of a wimp when it comes to horror movies.
That's totally fine. Just real quick, what kind of movies do you like?
What are my favorite movies? I guess I like comedies and I like romantic movies. I really love. I'm like a real wuss, and I cry really easy at movies. So and I love comedy. When Albert Brooks was in his prime, like Defending Your Life is one of my favorite movies. And Real Life, that was another one of his movies. I love stuff like Frankie and Johnny, the one with Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer. Like really, I guess, just really romantic movies. That's horrible, right? That's a horrible thing to put in there. And I'm weeping. I'm weeping. I don't know what that is, but sorry.
It's nothing.
I have no defense for it at all. People will hear that and go, "That's the stupidest friggin' thing I ever heard." And I have no I'm gonna say you're 100% right. I don't know why that is.
That's totally fine. Well, I want to thank you for coming on because this has been great. I love talking to you.
It's been so much fun. Thank you. I can see that you really put a lot of your heart and soul into this, and your questions were awesome and really well articulated and thought out. So thank you very much.
I appreciate
it
that.
A pleasure.
Cool. I appreciate that. And I always, when I see the pictures of you at the conventions, it seems like you really have a good time. And talking to you, it's clear that you do, and you still love doing the music. So that's really cool to see.
It is. It is. I guess at some point I'm going to hang it up, but I know my time is limited. You know, I'm going to throw those hips out, and they're going to stay out at one point. But while I've still got the energy and the desire to do it, I'm really sort of happy for every day, you know, that I can do it.
Yeah. Well, I said this a bunch of times since I was sick, you know, you should do what you love while you can do it, and be with people that you love while you can, because you never know when you can't anymore. So that's how I try to live and try to tell people.
There you go. I think that's wiser words were never spoken. That's very true.
So I hope to see you sometime at a convention.
Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah. I'd love that. Please, if I happen to be anywhere near where you are, come by and say hello. We can hang out a little bit.
Cool, definitely. Well, thanks again. This was great.
Okay, man.
All right, you all go to withoutyourhead.com. I'll come over there and put my boot up in your ass.